breaking videos as well that we have gotten as the Russian offensive continues on day 10. A video in fact has emerged which Russian troops can be seen setting houses on fire in Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv. Now we have seen how in public the Russia in fact has maintained that they are not targeting the residential areas, they're not targeting the civilians, but very clearly we can see in those visuals that have come out from Kharkiv now, one of the biggest cities of Ukraine, where Russian troops in fact have been seen setting the residential areas on fire. There is one such video of a building that has been set on fire because of heavy shelling that has taken place in Kharkiv, and you can see even as we see the double speak of a Russian delegation and Russia as well, we see in Kharkiv that a building in fact has been set on fire. There are several such gory images that have come to light from one of the biggest cities in Ukraine, be it Kharkiv, be it Kherson or Kyiv as well. But we have seen how the residential areas, the residential buildings, maternity hospitals, all of these civilian areas continue to get targeted by the Russian troops. In the latest now we see in Kharkiv that a building has been set on fire. Let me go across to my colleague Shivani Sharma, who is joining us on the broadcast as well. Shivani, we see the kind of Russian doublespeak that has come to light. From the very beginning, Russia had been claiming that they're not targeting the public areas, they're not targeting civilian areas, but the pictures really speak exactly the opposite, where we see residential areas now in Kharkiv that have been targeted. Shivani, what more are you picking up from where you are right now?
Priyanka, we've seen similar pictures prior to this too. We have seen how the civil buildings have been attacked by Russian forces, and Russians claim that the Ukrainians have been using human shields. And in fact, Russia has also claimed that Ukrainian army and the military has been hiding around these civil buildings, and that's what the claim is all about. What Russia says, that when it is justifying these kind of attacks, while Ukraine has been saying that Russia has not left any civil buildings, also they are not leaving even hospitals. And they in fact said that when the second round of talks were on, and in fact when the first round of talks were on, that time also shelling was going on inside Ukraine on various locations. So these are the pictures which we are getting from the war zone inside Ukraine on various cities, be it Kyiv, be it Kharkiv, be it other cities of Odessa. And the presence of Russian troops inside is escalating each day. The attacks are escalating each day. There are bombings on these buildings. Buildings are being set on fire. So the aggression is continuing, while the Zelensky's office has now confirmed that very soon there will be the third round of talks between Russia and Ukraine. What would these talks yield? We have to see, we have to wait for this, because this time the venue of the talks has been changed. The first two rounds were held in Belarus, but this time the indications are that these talks will be held in Turkey. So is there something new on the agenda when Russia and Ukraine will be sitting on the talking table? What will they negotiate about? While we see that there have been contradictions of what Russia has been claiming. It says that it wants peace, but at the condition of Ukraine not allying with the NATO, as it poses a threat for Russians' national security. While Ukraine has always maintained around these talks that it will not accept any kind of precondition, it has been retaliating strongly from the ground. We've seen how even the civilians in Ukraine have now picked up weapons. They are getting training and they are retaliating to these Russian attacks. But certainly the picture is getting serious each day. Today, almost the 10th day is getting over, and the evacuation has also been hampered. The agreement of the temporary ceasefire that had come up after the second round of talks could not be maintained, because we have seen that Russia has claimed that Ukraine has not supported during this evacuation drive. But Ukraine says that Russia has been violating this temporary ceasefire. So a lot of these pictures are emerging, Priyanka, and we have to see what the third round of talks will bring about.
Absolutely, Shivani, and this also the kind of bombarding that we have seen, this also comes in the backdrop of the third round of talks that are all set to take place between Ukraine and Russia. And also we see how even now, as Russia has promised a humanitarian corridor, even now shelling continues on residential blocks. Shivani, I want to thank you for the moment. We will take a look at this one-minute report on Ukraine.
As Russia's raging military offensive towards Ukraine continues, watch how a large explosion lit up the night sky in Chernihiv in the wee hours of Saturday. As Russia continues to press on with its assault on the Ukrainian city, Chernihiv suffered another night of airstrikes. Ever since Russia declared military offensive against Ukraine on February 24th, Russian troops have launched hundreds of missiles on one Ukrainian city after another in an apparent bid to cut off Ukraine's access to the sea. Meanwhile, a vast Russian armored column threatening Kyiv remains stalled outside the capital. With the invasion in its second week, another round of talks between Russia and Ukraine yielded a tentative agreement to set up safe corridors, and yet Russia's attacks continue unabated. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Up next, viewers, we're getting some more breaking images from Ukraine, this time now from Irpin, in fact near the Kyiv region itself, where a video shows that people are trying to evacuate from Irpin in the Kyiv region, but the bridge and partly railways have also been destroyed. Remember, viewers, from the very moment that the Russian escalation had begun from 10 days back, we had seen how there was public infrastructure that was being targeted by the Russian troops, and that's exactly what is also hampering the movement of the civilians now. Earlier, just 2 days back also, we had seen that the Russian troops have been trying to also target the railway stations and railway tracks as well. And now we see that the bridges as well, that we had seen that the Ukrainian army had been destroying to make sure that the Russian troops do not have a clear access to the entire city of Kyiv. Now that also is creating hindrances in the civilians who are trying to safely evacuate from Ukraine as well. And those are the images on your screen, viewers, from Irpin now, from the Kyiv region as well, the place where three-pronged attack of the Russian army is taking place. Now let's take a quick check of all the top stories. People continue to arrive in Romania as they fled from the violence caused by Russia's invasion. The refugees, mostly women, children and elderly, pulled suitcases with their basic necessities as they crossed the border to their European neighbor. The European Union also decided to grant people fleeing temporary protection and residency permits. A nearly immobile line of people blocked the roads leading to Ukraine's border with Poland. Refugees continue to arrive in Poland from Ukraine on foot, pulling trolleys as they leave behind everything. Suddenly becomes refugees fleeing to save their lives. Hundreds of refugees from Ukraine have been arriving in Berlin daily on trains in Poland. At Berlin's main train station, hundreds of volunteers were waiting for refugees to arrive. They were holding up welcome signs offering to house refugees in private homes. Now, Przemysl train station in Poland was crowded as people continued to flee from Ukraine following the Russian invasion. The town near Poland's border with Ukraine is one of the main points where hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees arrive as they flee the invasion. Thousands of additional US troops recently deployed to Poland to strengthen NATO's eastern flank stationed in the area. More than 1.2 million Ukrainians have fled the war zone in the last 2 weeks. Some crossed the borders and some stranded to cross and save their lives. Ukrainians who have already fled from Ukraine are now extending help and support to their fellow Ukrainians to cross the borders and arranging accommodation as they flee hardships of an uncertain future amid the unabated Russian assault. Up next, viewers, we're also tracking everything that's happening with NATO as well. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg doubled down on the refusal to the US and other allies to support a no-fly zone over Ukraine following the Russia's invasion. And here's what NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg had to also say since the entire controversy has broken out over the no-fly zone and the controversial statements of President Zelensky as well. Let's have a look.
We have a responsibility as NATO allies to prevent this war from escalating beyond Ukraine, because that will be even more dangerous, more devastating, and will cause even more human suffering. So we have made it clear that we are not going to move into Ukraine neither on the ground or in the Ukrainian airspace. And of course the only way to implement a no-fly zone is to send NATO planes, fighter planes, into Ukrainian airspace and then impose that no-fly zone by shooting down Russian planes. And our assessment is that we understand the desperation, but we also believe that if we did that, we'll end up with something that could end in a full-fledged war in Europe, involving many more countries and causing much more human suffering.
Straight away, viewers also getting a new video from Zaporizhia, in fact in Ukraine, where it gives us a glimpse of the number of people wishing to join the territorial defense units. Now this comes after hours of President Zelensky, who had asked the civilians to come out on the streets and defend their motherland. And we have seen several, sporadic training centers as well that have been set up so that the civilians can get appropriate training with respect to joining the forces to defend Ukraine against the Russian invasion. In Zaporizhia, of course, we also see the geographical location, which is also very, very important, viewers, because this also comes on south of the Donbas region and just north of the peninsula, that is Crimea, that has already been taken over by Russia. Also near Kherson, another city that has already been taken over Russia as well. So we see the kind of movement of civilians in this particular area where people are gathering up to join the forces to defend their motherland as asked for by their president. Welcome back, viewers. We're tracking for you all the updates as far as the Ukrainian crisis is concerned. Now, we had seen over the last few hours how Russia had declared a ceasefire, but since then a war of words that has broken out between Russia and Ukraine with respect to the delay in the ceasefire, and Ukraine also claiming that Russia is in fact not walking the talk when it comes to the humanitarian corridors that needs to be established for safe evacuation of civilians. Let's take a look at this report on the same.
The Russian military will observe a ceasefire in 2 areas of Ukraine beginning from today to allow civilians to evacuate.
Сегодня, 5 марта, с 10 часов утра московского времени, российской стороной объявлен режим тишины и открыты гуманитарные коридоры для выхода мирных жителей из городов Мариуполя и Волновахи. Гуманитарные коридоры и маршруты выхода согласованы с украинской стороной.
The Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement that it had agreed on evacuation routes with Ukrainian forces from the strategic port of Mariupol in the southeast and the eastern city of Volnovakha.
По вошедшим в город подразделениям народной милиции боевики нацбатальонов Азов и Айдар ведут огонь с позиций, оборудованных в школах, детских садах, больницах.
Meanwhile, officials in the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol said they were delaying an evacuation of the civilian population, accusing Moscow's troops of breaking a ceasefire. The invasion has drawn condemnation and severe sanctions from Western nations, balancing punishment of the Kremlin with fears of a hazardous escalation.
Remember, this is a ceasefire that has been called in by Russia. As of now, we haven't really heard anything from the Ukrainian authorities. In a short while from now, in the next 15 minutes, we are being told that some consolidated report of what's happened in the last 24 hours will be provided to the foreign press, giving us a sense of which are the areas that are still under the control of Ukraine.
Well, viewers, even as Russia had declared a ceasefire and there were peace talks that took place between Ukraine and Russia, we have seen how an aerial dogfight that really broke out between the Ukrainian and the Russian troops, where series of videos have emerged where Russian choppers and Ukrainian choppers, in fact, allegedly have also been shot down. Let's take a look at this report from the ground as to what's really happening in Ukraine.
With Russia-Ukraine conflict reaching to a ceasefire to aid the human corridors established in Ukraine, the Ukrainians witnessed an intense aerial dogfight earlier in the morning. Ukrainians' air defense specialists shot down the Russian attack aircraft and the pilot ejected. The pilot was caught, and the first interrogation of the Russian pilot revealed that after the destruction of the plane over Chernihiv, his partner was eliminated. The military further asked more about his objectives of the mission. And the solid air defense of Ukraine continued to operate while the captured pilot faces further interrogation. Bureau Report, Republic TV.